This 35-year-old mother ran a 15:04 solo 5K. U.S. anti-doping might be overreaching, and USA's number 2 race walker Cody Risch joins us to discuss how to rebuild momentum.
Information about the world of running, inspiration to fuel passion and excellence, and ideas for making connections and finding community. You're listening to AtoZrunning. Thanks for listening once again. And for those of you who are just beginning to listen to this podcast, thank you for joining us. I'm Andy, and this is Zach.
I'm Zach.
He's still Zach. And today we have a really cool topic of momentum.
Momentum. So we're coming out of this pandemic time, and for many of us, that means something is changing in our training. So I've talked to many who have been hurt or have been dealing with some kind of nagging thing and just figured if you're going to take time off to get something healed up, now's definitely the time to do it. And then, of course, many of the rest of us who just without much on the horizon weren't necessarily training in the same way.
Building momentum. Yeah, so I'm excited today to have Cody Risch on. He is probably someone who has the most amount of U.S. championship podiums of almost anyone I know.
Personally, yeah.
Yeah, personally. Yeah, except for Dathan. So that's a pretty great accolade there. So we're excited to have him on to talk about this topic. And I wanted to kind of set it up real quick by giving this quote, which is, every object persists in a state of rest or uniform motion in a straight line unless it's compelled to change that state by forces impressed on it. That's Newton's law of motion.
I was about to say, that sounds familiar. Was that Newton? Yeah.
Yeah, it was Newton. And that kind of sums up, I mean, even in just the law of motion, momentum is included in that, and our sport can really be translated to gaining momentum. It's not going to happen by chance. It's going to happen on purpose. So we're going to be talking about that today, and something that Zach and I have both been doing to try to keep on this track of momentum is cross-training lately.
Yeah, so the number one reason why you should cross-train when you can't run is because if you don't, well, basically it's anything you can do to not have to start from zero. So you think about an object at rest is the hardest thing to get moving, according to that law, according to Newton's law. An object at rest is you when you're not doing anything. So even if you can't cross-train, even depending on the nature of your injury, doing some kind of like just core work or like yoga, anything that is more than zero matters. And then the more you can do and the closer it is to running training, the better that movement out of rest will be.
Yeah, so I've been doing a lot of aqua jogging, and I have found that using the belt, I'm just going to give a little free tip
the floating
here.
aqua belt.
If the aqua jog belt is too easy for you, try it without the belt, and it's a lot harder.
Yeah, because I would drown if I tried it without the belt.
I don't know about that.
I think in order for me to successfully aqua jog and not drown, I have to wear a life jacket, the aqua jogger belt, a full wetsuit, preferably one of the newer floatier ones.
Yeah, he's not that great at swimming, and he's like pure muscle, so I'm going to give him a little pat on the back for that.
I am not pure muscle.
He's pretty muscular, and I might have more buoyancy, and so that's why I don't need a belt. But I do want to mention Happy Father's Day to all you fathers out there. I know that's not like a smooth transition point, but I just want to say that we talk a lot about mother runners. We talk a lot about how it is, coming from postpartum into running, but there are a lot of unseen challenges that dads face too because of the same things, sleepless nights, having to bring the kids along in the jogger. So props to all you father runners out there making it happen. So we're going to head into the world of running for this week. So this first element of news is personally very inspiring. Kira D'Amato, she's a 35-year-old mom. She just got a time trial PR hitting the 2020 Olympic standard for the 5K, 15:10. And now it doesn't count.
She ran, what, 15:05?
Oh, right.
So
she ran
the standard was
15:04, and the standard is 15:10. So she broke that 15:10 barrier. It doesn't count towards the Olympic standard, but she did it. I mean, she was able to run that. So that will put her into a good space for her to come out of all of this training and these time trials into the winter, where she'll be able to see if she can get on the list for the USATF outdoor track and field Olympic trials.
Yeah, keep in mind, there is no option to qualify until December 1st. It's just been put on hold from the Olympic Committee on down. Everyone's just saying hold off qualifications.
But of course, that's inspiring to me because she's a mom. She's 35. She had an over-minute PR in order to achieve this. So I'm looking at that 17-minute barrier, and I'm seeing her crush it and get this 15:04. And it just makes me more motivated and optimistic that I can achieve my goals too.
You're going to run 15:04?
Not 15:04. I would like to first, when we're talking about momentum, we're talking about steps towards the goals that we have. I think that 17 minutes is a pretty big one for me, and I'd like to hit that first.
While we're on that topic of momentum, etc., Runner's World had just on June 19th, they published an article that was about why we procrastinate. So it's like the science of procrastination or putting things off and how to avoid it. Now, the point that they were making there was that in terms of running, like speed work, and they were talking about like hard workouts, we want to procrastinate or put them off or skip them and I'll do it tomorrow, that kind of thing. But it's based off the premise of, we put off negative things. It's kind of a default setting. We try to avoid them, which makes sense. Fight or flight. I generally want to try to get rid of negative stimulus in my life. So if it's a negative thing. And then we're also impatient about or excited about positive things. And in that sense, here's where I just kind of wonder if the article should be two things at the same time. Because in my mind, speed work is just as likely to be a positive thing as it is a negative thing, depending on who you're talking to. We get really excited to do fast workouts and things like that. However, the problem here, of course, is, timing. So I don't want to put them off when I need to do them, and I don't want to get too excited for them when I don't need to do them. So Runner's World article, it's an interesting read. Certainly check it out. They do this like jelly bean study. The jelly bellies where they have like nasty flavors and lovely flavors. Well, anyway, they do a study with that basically yields the result you would think it yields. People try not to eat the disgusting ones and try to sooner or earlier eat the good ones. And there's a delayed gratification thing that's part of all of this. It's very interesting stuff, but it has a lot to do with this momentum thing because everything needs to happen in the right amount at the right time to be able to build and sustain momentum. And we are going to talk more about that in just a moment. First, we got one more thing, and this one is about Christian Coleman. And we want to kind of get into just a moment here how the USATF does drug testing for the athletes and some of the frustrations that seem to be developing around, especially in Christian Coleman's case, around getting penalized because you're missing a drug test. So it's not that you failed the drug test, but you missed 1 or 2 or 3. It's a 3-strike policy, and that's been very frustrating for a number of athletes.
Yeah, and part of the reason is because they're coming for the testing outside of the window that's been established.
Yeah.
So I don't know exactly.
Seems a little bit rude.
Yeah. So I don't know exactly what happened with Christian Coleman. I did read an article where he was out Christmas shopping. He was like 5 minutes away, and they never called him. He would have gotten back within that time frame if they would have just let him know, and that was frustrating to him. But Leo Connor, who we've had on this podcast before, we'll link to her episode, but she almost missed one because it was outside of the window that she had let them know that was okay for testing. But thankfully her husband was home and she could like hurry back and get the test done, but it was not in the window that was established.
Yeah.
So if she would have missed that, they would have called it a violation. But is that fair? I mean, these people are already setting aside, saying they're going to be home for that time every day, and then it's outside of that window. She was there when she was supposed to be, and then she left when she was allowed to, So
pulling back the veil just a tiny bit on this, Andy and I are not, we don't know this firsthand because neither of us have been concerns for USATF. We have not been in their crosshairs.
Zach has been drug tested. I have not.
Only because of a race result, though. Sometimes you're drug tested at the event if you finish in a certain degree, and other times you're drug tested spontaneously throughout the year. But they only spontaneously drug test people that they think are worth it for better, the really good ones. So that's why Leah's being tested, of course, Christian Coleman and the like. Well, here's the thing. What they do, they basically require you to update the agency on what you're doing and when you're doing it all the time. Mm-hmm. I'm not even kidding you. Like, it's almost, they have to know almost your entire schedule every day. Mm-hmm. And if you need to vary from that schedule, like I decide, I'm going to go get some pizza right now, I have to update that on the site, and I have to do it within like 24 hours or before 24 hours. It can't be within 24 hours. Things like that. And it's just like, really? You're going to control every element of our lives? How about instead we talk about at least within a certain period of time, I need to have a couple of points of availability, and you're going to show up at one of those.
Yeah.
And if you show up outside of that availability, it's not my problem.
It's not a violation. So we're all about clean sport. I think it's extremely important. It is, vitally important for the sport. So we're not saying that this testing shouldn't happen, but I think that the agency should have as rigorous of standards for themselves as they do for the athletes. So if the time frame is going to be a time frame, it needs to be upheld. So it goes two ways. And obviously we're coming from, just researching the topic, and we have not experienced it firsthand. But what it seems to be, and what we would hope for clean sport, is that athletes would know when they're going to get tested, that they would be aware that they'd set aside the time. They're taking it very seriously by doing that on a daily basis, but then it's also going to happen at that time.
So there's plenty to be concerned about and frustrated about within that realm on both sides of the experience, but we're going to go ahead and move on now at this point, because we've got such a great conversation about rebuilding momentum. And before we get to that, let's take a quick break.
Our featured guest today is with Cody Risch. He's going to help us talk about momentum. And we know Cody through Cornerstone University, where we all went to college, me, Zach, and Cody. And Zach and Cody were coached by Nate Q Van Holten, and he became an expert on the race walk. So Q continues to coach Cody to this day as part of Q Elite. He trains in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and I want to give a couple of accolades for Cody. There are quite a few of them, because most of the races that he does compete in, he does very well. So we're just going to kind of take some of the best. A few of his accolades being national champion in 2014 in the NAIA for the race walk. That was a 3K, and that was also a national record. He's competed for Team USA 5 times in international competition. He's an 8-time medalist at U.S. championships, and that includes 2 U.S. outdoor 5K race walk championships. So he won in 2017 and 2018. Well, we have a lot to get through in this topic, and his fiance, Monica Lawrence, is also here with us today, and we got to glean some of her insight too. She is also a race walker. Let's hear from Cody.
All right, so we're going to try to dig deep into the topic. As you know, the topic is rebuilding or finding momentum again, trying to find the groove again. And in order to really do this well, we thought it would be great to bring on Cody Risch. Cody is a good friend, longtime teammate, and in many ways, he's a great example of how to approach the sport from different perspectives, from different experiences, and to speak to that in a unique way, because Cody is also a race walker. Cody, start with that. We just want to know, how does race walk compare to distance running?
Race walk is very similar in the sense that most of the races on the professional stage are 20K, so 12.4 miles, or 50K, so 31 miles. So
yeah,
it's
no
very,
sweat.
very far. And I mean, overall, it takes longer than running, so you're out there for an extended period of time. I mean, just because with walking, it's overall slower than running. So it's definitely like that. Race walk is, I guess, different from running in the sense of the actual muscle groups it uses. So with running, most of your driving force comes from your calves and from your quads. When you're going up a hill, when you're trying to surge, that's where your power comes from. In race walk, however, it comes from your anterior tibs, so your shin and your hamstring. So kind of just the opposite parts of the leg. With race walk, I guess I should put this in there right now. There are 2 rules that define what you're doing as walking instead of running. And since I can't stand up and demonstrate this for you, I'll do my best to explain it in words.
We were really hoping to include a visual of this.
Well, if you just YouTube it, I'm sure you can find something there.
As a matter of fact, if you YouTube Cody's name with race walk, you'll find some videos of him race walking.
We'll also put a link in the blog post associated with this podcast of Cody race walking.
I would say that's unnecessary, but I can't actually stop what you put on the podcast website.
You're right. You can't.
All right, rules. There are 2 things. And so in turn, while I am racing or while there's a race walk race going on, there are also judges watching to make sure you don't break the rules. And then 3 strikes and you're out is how it works. So the first rule is that you have to always be in contact with the ground. So before your toe comes up on your back foot, your heel of your lead foot has to hit down. And when that lead leg lands on the ground, it has to be completely straight. And so because of that rule, that kind of straighten rule, it usually looks pretty goofy, looks fairly not regular, because as normal humans walk or run or anything, when your lead leg lands on the ground, it's not straight. It's slightly bent and everything. So
that's also why it looks really fluid, just smooth. It's so cool.
When Cody does it, it looks smooth.
When it's done right. So if I attempt to race walk today, it will neither look fluid nor smooth.
So if we also happen to put a video up of Zach race walking on the podcast, you would look and be like, wow, that guy has something seriously wrong with him. But if you were to drive past me on the road while I'm race walking along the sidewalk, you'd be like, you know what, that dude's running form just doesn't look quite right. Like, I can't quite put my finger on it, but there's something not quite there. So...
And so that's kind of that's that line of what happens, right? When you're in final gear. So I'm thinking like finishing the 3K when you're really trying to move fast too. You're trying to ride that line of getting as close to running as possible, at least moving as fast as possible, while still maintaining the walk rules.
So that is very near and dear to my heart. In the NAIA, the 3K race walk is an event in indoor, and I, throughout my college career, went into the national meet ranked first in the nation 4 times, 3 times, a few times, and ended up finishing second. And a lot of times it was from that last finishing kick. So as a runner and as a walker, it's true here too, but I'll explain it as a runner so that you guys can kind of relate a little more. The faster you go, the longer you're off the ground for. The bigger your strides are, the more time you're in the air. It's the same thing with race walk. The problem is that you can't actually be off the ground. So the faster you go, you really need to focus on staying low to the ground and getting your lead leg on the ground as quick as possible so that you don't get a mark, is what it's called.
So, Cody, how did you get into race walk?
Oh, my gosh. What a question.
Well, so we need to preface that just slightly more because we also have with Cody, fiance Monica Lawrence, who is part of the answer to that question we just found out as we were talking prior to recording this. So, Monica, step in a moment and share with us how Cody got into race walk.
Yes. So I actually didn't get Cody into race walk. That was him losing a bet. So if you ever want to bet against Cody, don't.
Do.
No. But once he did get into race walk, I had actually already been race walking for a year at that point. So I actually got to help teach him how to race walk, what the technique was, and pace him and beat him. That's like the key. Beat him in some workouts.
Very nice.
She keeps saying this word beat, but I don't think that's an accurate description of what happened.
So it seems pretty black and white to me.
So I lost a bet to Q, our coach at one point in time. He bet me that if I made it to nationals in the current year, I was a sophomore at the time. He said, Cody, if you make it to nationals this year, then you won't have to, hold on, let me get this right before I keep saying it. He said, Cody, if you don't make it to nationals this year, then you have to race walk next year. And I was like thinking to myself that I don't think I can make it to nationals. I was kind of coming down with an injury that I wasn't able to train quite as much. It was kind of just like a matter of time, but I definitely didn't want to race walk. So I ended up taking what I considered to be the lesser of two evils to race walk that season for the month that was left with the goal of making it to nationals to then win the bet. Hey, I don't need to race walk again, which did happen. I did qualify for nationals that time. I would like to make a little plug here and say I started race walking on a Friday, and 8 days later on Saturday, I qualified for nationals. Not many people have done that.
That's not bad.
So then I went into my junior year of college the next season thinking, sweet, I don't have to race walk. I made my bet, but kind of like Zach, my true ambition, that's maybe too bold. My goal, my favorite event was steeplechase, and that's what I wanted to do. But the previous summer, I had been diagnosed with osteoporosis, so I'm not able to train quite as much as I wanted to, and especially with steeple, jumping over barriers, it's way more strenuous on your bones, on your body. So I decided that in order to steeplechase outdoor, I would race walk for the indoor season. 3 months of then I could do just as much cardio, just as much aerobic training, race walk, so with way less impact, way less stress on my body, and then be able to steeplechase outdoor, qualify for nationals, steeple, be the next Zach Ripley. That's everybody's dream.
Right.
Funny.
So that ended up going really well, like probably actually too well, because I went into nationals that indoor season that I'd chosen to race walk, ranked number 1 out of all the other collegians in the NAIA, and ended up finishing 2nd, which super good. First real nationals that I had trained for, finishing 2nd in the nation. That's not bad. However, being ranked number 1 initially and then finishing 2nd as a junior to a freshman, just my natural competitiveness that I have was like, okay, this can't ever happen again. I can't let that kid beat me. I'm a junior. He's a freshman. Like, I have to do something. So I ended up continuing to race walk.
That almost seemed like it was like orchestrated for you. Because if you would have won your first time ever doing the race walk, would you be the Team USA race walker that you are now?
That is a phenomenal question, and I have no idea. Because I think that if I would have won, then I would have been like, awesome, sweet, mission accomplished. Now let's steeplechase.
Yeah.
But, I mean, winning's fun. And if I could say, hey, I won once, maybe I'll go try and win again, I don't know what would have happened.
That's an interesting question of motivation in general there. What motivates a person more, to be on top and to defend that, or, to just barely and need to, the next thing. So we're not going to go into motivation too deeply at the moment, but we do want to kind of segue this into how do we deal with the disruptions we're experiencing and how to find the momentum again. And even just as you're talking there, Cody, part of what got you into the race walk was a disruption. And I've actually heard it said in many different ways that one of the best coping mechanisms when there's a major disruption is to find something else to interest you, to become passionate about while you're trying to deal with that. So a lot of runners get into a cross-training method pretty heavily. Some of that is because we tend to have addictive personalities. And so, I can't be addicted to running at the moment, so I'm going to be addicted to aqua jogging. Like Andy.
Zwift, like Zach.
Or Zwift, yes. So, in that instance, it's kind of interesting that you mentioned, Cody, because it was in the midst of that kind of thing. But in so many ways, everybody sitting at the table here knows what it's like to experience disruptions in our training and knows what it takes. Well, it's kind of 3 things. It's the moment of the disruption and how do I cope with that? What do I do? Do I kind of try to push through it, or do I fall into the funk, all that stuff? We're going to get into that. And then you have the how do I deal with the disruption so that I can continue to train in some capacity to still be strong, any of those kinds of things. And then it's now that I'm coming out of the disruption, how do I maintain progress? How do I cope with feeling like I'm not fit and I'm, out of shape and all of that? So we want to get into that a little bit here. And I think the first question is, when the disruption has hit you, Cody, what do you do about that?
So as you're talking about this, I have a phenomenal example. So I'm going to talk kind of through the story of these few races where all of that happened and my mindset and everything that happened. My senior year of track, NAIA, Q's my coach, and Q had a streak as an NAIA coach to have always won the conference steeple race. Yes, I've talked about steeple before, but I'm a race walker, and we're going to keep talking about steeple even though I'm a race walker. But so we're getting around to the conference meet. Our top steepler, Lewis Fallon, who's been on the show before, he's injured. And so Q comes calling to who happens to be the next fastest steepler, his best race walker. And he says, hey, Cody, listen, we're here at conference. You have to win the steeple because I can't lose the steeple. That's my thing. I said, you got it, boss. I'll do this for you. Also, I wanted a steeple, so it was like kind of a win-win. So I ended up winning the conference steeple that year. However, in the process, I ended up breaking my foot. Which sounds way worse than it actually was. It was just a stress fracture in my heel, but still broken, still highly painful. So I spent the next few weeks on the bike. That was 3 weeks before nationals, and I had qualified for nationals. I was going to go compete in race walk at nationals, but now I can barely walk, much less try and race walk a 5K. So with that in my head, at this point in time, I had gone into nationals, ranked first 4 times now and never won. So I'm a senior, like this is my last chance. I finished this steeple race and all of a sudden I'm cross training. I can barely walk. I'm in a ton of pain. So with that, I think the first part the point I want to make is many athletes kind of fall into the Stuart Little, Chicken Little. the Chicken Little mindset of the sky is falling, the sky is falling. So
Yep.
I'm super excited about this race, been motivated for this, been like working towards this the whole time. Now this one little thing pops up and now everything is ruined. That was kind of my mindset. And so as you're working through these these setbacks, these disruptions in your training, in racing, everything, that first step is kind of take a step back, kind of just chill, like take a deep breath. I've been working with, let me pause from the story just to say, I've been working with Adam Homolka weekly since 2013. So 7 years.
Nice.
And there's so many times that I've walked in after a hard week of training and said, Adam, my knee is hurting. I don't know if I can train tomorrow. This is, everything's gone. I have a race coming up. And he's like, Cody, your knee is hurt for a total of 9 hours? Like you're fine. Like we're going to get this taken care of. So kind of step back, that chill, like that mental like peace about everything's going to be fine. Okay, back to the story. So we get to nationals. Building into nationals, I didn't walk or run or anything until the week of the race. And then the day before the race was the farthest I had race walked in about a month, and it was 2.5 miles. The race was 5K. So now I'm going into the race not feeling as fit as I possibly can. So many negatives that I could just kind of dwell on and focus on. It was super hot. I haven't trained a ton. My competition is these 2 other guys who I have raced multiple times. I still race against them every time I race. Same 2 guys, just constantly. So I'm kind of nervous, but as I got to the line, to the start line of that race, there's that mindset of there's no place I'd rather be. Like, this is what I want to be doing. So whether you're in a workout, whether you're going for a long run at 6 a.m. in the morning when you have a busy day ahead of you, like, it might suck kind of in the moment. It might be kind of rough, but that just like, this is what I want to do. Like there's more coming later that I'm working towards that, like, I don't know. It's just kind of that nice, like, peace of mind. That race, I end up finishing second like I have every other time. But then continue biking and kind of healing that heel because I had qualified for the U.S. National Championships, which was another 4 weeks away. I decided one day, because it's June in Michigan, it was sunny, it was warm, I went out on a bike ride out on the roads and ended up flipping over the handlebars and breaking my thumb as I landed. So here's a time when in the matter of 2 months, the amount of disruptions I've had have just been one after another, like every week is something new. Yep. So now, once again, I've gotten past the NAIAs, and now I'm on this bigger level, a bigger stage, and there's once again a setback. I have to go to the doctor for my thumb. I'm in a cast. I can't train as much. I'm still trying to work through this foot injury that I had before. And it's just constantly that mentality of, okay, take a step back, chill. It's your thumb. You can race walk with a hurt thumb. It's not like my toe's broken or my leg is falling off. So, like, those things come up, and they feel way more intense in the moment than they actually are. But yeah, so just to finish out that story, I ended up going to that national championship. And with 6 laps remaining, it was a 20K on the track. 6 laps remaining, 1.5 miles, I was a lap down from the guy who beat me at NAIAs. But the way that race was going, I was kind of getting better and better as the race was finishing. I was speeding up as the race went on. My first half was kind of slow, but then just gaining energy, gaining momentum, gaining speed. And then once you start gaining that momentum, probably here's another good analogy for this in general, gaining speed, it just kept going and kept going. So I ended up passing him, so unlapping myself with 6 laps to go, and then not only unlapping myself, but also passing him again 400 meters later. And I just remember on the track, 6 laps to go, I look up in the stands at Q and say, hey, how far back is he? And he's like, well, you got like 350 meters. Okay. He's like, Cody, you realize that, okay. He's like, he's ahead of you, but like 350 meters ahead of you, but it looks like he's behind you. Like, you know that, right? Yeah. Okay, I got it. Next lap. Q, where is he? 300 meters. Oh, so we're going to gain a little bit. Next lap. And just like that constant little bit. So it was a 7-minute PR. But
Nice.
Yeah.
Just toss that in there.
Just to plug that in right at the end.
So it really, when you're in the midst of that disruption, the perspective matters, and I can appreciate, you mentioned Adam. For most of us, it tends to be very helpful to have someone else speak into that moment for us.
And say the sky is not falling.
Yeah, right.
And also fix us. Like our actual
Well,
bodies.
Also
It
fix
helps.
the falling sky.
It helps if there's someone who can actually fix the. Yeah, and so as you're talking through that, Cody, and the disruptions can kind of be building momentum too. So especially as they come close together like that, it makes it that much harder. I think in so many ways, my almost initial reaction a lot of the time is I immediately start like planning what exactly I'm going to do and how exactly I'm going to do it, and I never leave opportunity to like find out what the real disruption is and what it's going to take to get past it. It's like, okay, this is how I'm feeling, so I'm going to need to take 3 days off, and during those 3 days off I'm going to do exactly these things, and then I'm going to start running in this way exactly. And then the problem there is as soon as it doesn't happen according to my plan, it's massively discouraging.
Yeah, I'm not as calculated as you are.
Sounds like that might not be a bad thing, though. But Andy also does not react the same way as me. I'm curious, though, Andy. We haven't brought you in a ton yet, so I want to. What do you do when the disruption hits you? Where does your head go, and what do you try to do to get past it?
Something my dad always says to me is, what's the next positive thing you can do? What's the next step? Just the next step to put you back on track. And that kind of micro goal, just a tiny little micro goal, kind of sets me up to be able to even see my big goal again. But I can't say that I'm flawless in that. I'm rather emotional, and so when things do hit, it can be difficult for me to kind of gather myself and say, yeah, I still want this and it's worth it. Because sometimes looking at how far I have to go makes it harder to set my eyes ahead again instead of just like kind of sitting in my sadness.
I think it fits a ton. Instead of, hey, my ultimate goal is to qualify for Boston or to make it to this whatever race you're doing or hit this time. In that moment, hitting a goal of, okay, I am going to go home and I'm going to roll out for whatever amount of time. My goal is to tomorrow take an easy day. Like those little small goals that kind of just stepping stones along the way. That's huge.
Are we still talking about running, or is this life now?
Life. Well,
That
what's
was
the
Monica.
difference? What's the difference, really?
And she's spot on. Yeah, that is definitely life lessons through running. And we like to draw all those parallels here. I love it.
We probably need to apply, though, in a similar sense. When we're in a moment of despair in general in life, it's really important to have rich community around us. And as runners, it's easy to be isolated in the nature of our sport.
And
so,
race walkers.
As race walk,
yes,
it's way more
I'm speaking
so.
more endurance athletes, but you're right, Cody, because not only are you isolated in the same sense as distance athletes tend to be, but also in a unique sense within the event itself. And as we get older in life, like adults versus collegiates versus high school, we just lose most of the community that is like sharing the mindset of our sport. And so, I've appreciated as we talk to people about like running clubs and those kinds of things. It's been really valuable to find ways to still grow that community piece. So this all kind of leads us to that point in time when you're through the disruption, or at least for the most part, you're able physically to do the thing you want to do again, to train, maybe not necessarily at like 100% of everything, but this is not always a good time for athletes. And especially as we're thinking about our audience right now, there are many people who are coming out of injury, coming out of just a period where they weren't doing as much training and now trying to get back into that groove. And finding that groove is hard. So whoever has a thought first at the table is going to be the first one to share. What does it take to find the groove again, and how do you get through the kind of the rocky, muddy period there when you're not feeling great and you're not fit yet? What's that like?
So once I finished college, started race walking more, I kind of made the mental decision that, hey, I'm going to embrace this a little bit. Like, I think that I'm doing kind of well. Like, I want to push it and kind of see what happens. Now that I'm young, I'm able to see how far I can go. And that next year was pretty good. I had a PR in the 20K race walk, which is the main event. And that was in 2015. It wasn't then until 2019 that I PR'd again. So I went 4 years of focusing the vast majority of my time, money, finances, energy, motivation to training, and no real results. And I think I learned a ton during that time, but that's a whole nother topic. But then in 2019, I PR'd in every event from the 3K up to the 20K. as well as having like my longest day, my longest race, like all those kind of like side PRs as well. Best tempo run, tempo walk. I still call it a tempo run, even though I'm race walking.
That's good with me.
But like as you get to that point, as I got to that point, and then that momentum starts building, like it's a super awesome feeling to feel that like kind of that ball rolling and like getting it better. Like, when you're starting a snowball, this is a horrible cliche, but you're starting a snowball and you try and pack the snow together and it's like not working. And then like maybe like, oh, I got it. And then you like start to roll and it's like, oh my gosh, here we go. And then the bigger the snowball gets, the easier it is to collect snow. It might get heavy, but so like I think it's super similar with that. So once you can get past that, the sky is falling phase, once you get through like the hard work of the recovery or the longer miles or the better planned tempo runs or whatever your plan is going to be for that time, and you start to kind of see that momentum building. Once you hit that point, just kind of the snowball effect is a huge aspect. And I think that helps just physiologically, like with you and your body and your training, but also mentally and emotionally. I think it's something that many runners, many athletes probably overlook is the emotional side. Like we think that like, oh, you got to be mentally strong. You have mental strength. There's sports psychologists that you can go see and talk to, and that's a big thing. There's also all of the physical. You got to do the actual training. You have to get your body strong enough to do it all. But then the emotional part. I mean, I know for myself, as I'm training, my entire day is planned around my run. What I eat, when I eat, how much I sleep, like the clothes I wear, whether I'm comfy or not. Like
So true.
So true. And so I have recently, a good example of that is recently I have gone gluten-free. That's a very tough transition to go from someone that used to eat pancakes 9 times a week. So, but then now I wake up and I'm like, man, bagel and peanut butter would be really good. But believe it or not, a bagel is actually just gluten all smushed together in a circle.
Wouldn't have guessed.
So now I have this just constantly like mental, emotional, like, man, okay, here we go. I'm doing this to train. My goal is X, Y, or Z. In order to get there, this is the sacrifice I'm making. Now, emotionally, that has a toll on you. That has a toll on your budget. It's way more expensive to eat gluten-free than it is to eat pancakes every day. So I think that emotional part is a big one.
Yeah, it's kind of the multifaceted, and one of the threads there that's tying them all together is the need for patience. These things take time, and they take consistent attention. And when you give consistent attention to something and it's not yielding the desired results, it's that much more emotionally and mentally draining, and among other things. So a story comes to my mind. I don't want to cut you off there, Cody, but this one was college, which always has appeal here in this conversation. It was I think my junior year of college when I started the cross country season hot. I was fit and everything was great, and it took about the first race before I came down with a stress fracture. And by the way, Cody, I first started feeling that stress fracture in Montana, which you weren't there on that trip. It wasn't until the next year
that was
you were
my
part.
First college experience was
That's
Montana.
quite an awesome experience. And it was all tainted for me because the last run on the last day when we were up there, something was not right, and I could just tell. And, so I end up with a stress fracture, and I take pretty much the entire cross-country season off. I tried to come back from it after like 2 or 3 weeks, and it didn't work. Backfired, and I ended up hurt more than when I originally hurt it. And so, I did the pool thing and did all that stuff. And it took me, so now I was training again by winter and trained all the way through the indoor season and all the way through the outdoor season without ever feeling myself again. And that's a piece that, so many of us are going to relate to that concept of just like, when do I feel myself again in training and competition? And it took until the end of May, the outdoor national championships, in fact, before that was the first race when I was like, I actually felt normal in that run for the first time and all of that. And patience, just every time I'd go out and I'd run a workout and I'd run a race, and it wasn't what it should have been, and I didn't feel the way I should have, and it just chipped away at that confidence. It just kept chipping away at it. And, I think none of that would have probably amounted to anything at that point if I didn't have the team around me that just kept saying, like, just keep working at it. Just keep working at it. Like, we know you're gaining fitness. You can see the positive trend. It's just not that steep upward slope that you always hope for.
So that brings a question to my mind, because you talking about the team. So sometimes it's not even your momentum that keeps you going. It's other people's momentum as you see them doing well, right?
That is so awesome, Monica. I love that. That is so true, because it's like when you're in the water and there's already like a rush in the river.
There's so many analogies in this.
We're getting deep. We're getting
analogies.
deep. No. It's great because it does take you. It pulls you along. Like if you're flowing like in the lake, you're not gonna be getting someplace as quickly as if you're in a river. And I think that's really. She's saying preach over there. It's true though. I love that, Monica. Yeah, the people around you can really help build your momentum.
So there's also then the question of just what does it take? So you think about like where you are when you're at your peak and you're training at the best you can possibly train. There's a lot going on there. And Cody, you even just mentioned like diet is even part of those things. And obviously, you know, all of this stuff fits together. And are you getting the right amount of sleep? What does it take to do in that period of rebuilding to get yourself back to the peak? And I think this is kind of my final reflection with this conversation is, you know, bring it back to the final practical piece of what do I have to do to find the momentum again and then sustain it?
Well, finding the momentum is one thing. Sustaining it is a whole nother monster in and of itself.
True.
As many of you I'm sure can relate to. One of the things that I have tried recently was I reached out to he's not a sports psychologist, but he's a mental strength coach. And so there's a bunch of these practices that I've been kind of working on and kind of doing like in the same way that you train your body, you're training your mind too. And that has helped me a ton, especially through the whole pandemic, the no races. Briefly, most of the professional races, which is everything that I'm doing right now, has been postponed. One can't qualify for anything. One can't race. There's no benefit with world rankings and all that side of track until December. Everything's been postponed, pushed back till then. So all the athletes trying to qualify for the Olympics, nothing's happening right now, as many of you know. But so with that, for me now, I had a race scheduled for the end of March, the end of April, the end of May, the end of June, and now all of them are done. So as a person who is mainly motivated by, hey, what's coming up next? What's my next race? Hey, I just had this race. Let's improve upon it. Well, I don't have that now. So I've been working on a bunch of like the mental side of things. And one of the big questions that has stuck out to me in doing all of this is the question, what is your why? And I can't give you an answer yet because I don't know yet. But what the cliche is, why do you run? Which it's a huge thing, but like even more so than that. So like I'm a substitute teacher. That's what I do in my free time. as to help pay the bills and everything as I'm training for race walk and whatnot. And I just spent a long-term sub job at Forest Hills Northern this past fall. And along with that also comes training, in which I'm sure I am 100% confident that Zach can totally relate to, is I was up every morning at 3:45 or 4:15, depending on how many times the alarm went off, and going out to do my training then, going out to do my walks, all of that stuff. And it's just, it's very tough to do that on such a regular basis. And then a day of being tired, the kids were not behaving the day before. I'm stressed about getting lessons planned, all that kind of stuff. And now I have to wake up and run super early in the morning, which also means I have to go to bed super early and can't hang out with my friends. Like, in doing all that, you have to have this, like, why are you doing it? Why do you wake up at 3:45 when there shouldn't be at 2 3:45s in a day? And so I can't give you an answer to that, but that's one thing that I've definitely been kind of like thinking about and working through and trying to figure out is like, I mean, I run because I have these goals I want to accomplish. Well, why do I have those goals? Well, I have those goals because, well, for me, I'm an Enneagram Type 7. I don't know if that means anything to anyone. Look it up. But in Enneagram Type 7, one of their key mottos is like, what's next? Like, what's the next thing I can do? Like, hey, I made it to this level. Can I get to the next level? So that's motivating me. And like, okay, well, where does that motivation come from? I know we're talking more about motivation now than kind of other things, but it's a huge part of it, I think. So,
Andy, add your piece.
As I'm hearing you talk, Cody, you're talking about momentum as being a choice. So I really like how you're saying, I'm getting up every day and I'm doing this. And sometimes we want to be swept away there's only so much other people can do for us. There's only so much affirmation can do for us. And you've gotten to the heart of momentum, which is the why, because we have to be internally driven. We talked about that last week on the podcast, that highly successful athletes are internally driven. And I do think you hit the nail on the head, because you had, 4 years where you weren't PRing, but you were working, you were showing up every day.
Yeah.
So that momentum wasn't a push to your back. That was you making the step by step by step by step. So I think that is kind of a key component to our conversation here, is that it's going to be work.
What we need to do here, Cody, is we just need to know what's coming. Yeah. And we know you've got a couple of things not necessarily related to racing going on as well. So just tell us what's on the horizon.
Yeah. So on the racing front, the coronavirus has affected so much, and so it's a very unknown thing. I know of things that are trying to happen and trying to be planned and whatnot. I have been in communication with a bunch of the athletes that are on the planning boards for these big meets to have a U.S. championships, to try and replan the race walk championships and all that kind of stuff on kind of the bigger scale in professional track and field. But for me personally, this coming summer, I have just gotten word that we are going to be allowed to have a track camp. I started hosting a track camp last year. It's been a dream of mine for a while. And so Michigan's Fastest Track Camp is what it's called, MFTC. And we will meet July 13th through the 17th from 9 a.m. to about noon. The time is still, we're working on the details of that, depending on how many people sign up. But this is a youth track camp for kids ages 7 to 14. So we will be working with, I have a few different coaches, kind of more elite athletes in the area that'll be coaching different events. We're going to focus on 4 main events, very general events, which is distance, sprints, jumps, and throws. So this is a very introductory, hey, here's track, this is the events, this is what it's like. And then as well as that, in that process, I also want to teach, here's how to be fit, here's how to be healthy, here's what eating right looks like, here's how to stretch, like all these things that kids can know. So
that's really cool. So we're linking to that.
Yep.
You can find all the details.
Definitely. And you're going to hear us talking about it more leading up to it, so we can make sure that it's right in front of your front of mind. So ages 7 to 14.
Ages 7 to 14. To sign up, it is actually run through the East Grand Rapids Rec Department. So it's at East Grand Rapids Track, which is super nice. We did it there last year. It worked out great. Super public track, very nice facilities, bathrooms, and everything. So that's where you go to the East Grand Rapids Rec Department. That's how you sign up. And then, yeah, I want as many people there as possible. It's great.
That's awesome. And in addition to that, of course, you mentioned previously your racing agenda really is going to pick up steam in December when the qualification window opens back up, which matters quite a bit.
Yep.
And especially why that's so relevant, because many of our audience members may not be too keenly aware of the fact that not only are you an aspiring Olympian, but you're actually in the hunt for this isn't just a I'm trying to do this thing, but you've been ranked 4th and 3rd and 2nd currently in the United States.
Yeah. So
that's a big deal.
Yeah. So a huge thing with that is world rankings. In world rankings, the way it works, very briefly, is you need to acquire an average of points based on races. You get points for your time or for your distance or your jump or whatever your height, whatever that is. You get points for that, and you get extra points for the meet that you competed in potentially. And so over the course of time, as a race walker, I need to do 3 races that can average to be one of the top 60 in the world in order to go to the Olympics. I'm currently ranked 2nd in America, which top 3 go, so that is okay-ish right now. But getting that 60th mark in the world is a tough feat.
Yeah, and the race walk is pretty steep in some places. There's a lot of talent out there. As you've mentioned, the United States doesn't necessarily represent the same kind of depth that other places do, and so it makes it difficult when you have to compare both levels of rankings.
Yeah, I am 2nd in America, but if you look at the Japanese race walkers, for example, or the Chinese race walkers, I am like 402nd. So
sounds like a marathon with the East Africans.
Yeah.
So really appreciate your time, both of you, Cody and Monica, and thank you for dealing with us with the rain that started pouring down on our equipment right in halfway through the episode. Those of you listening didn't know that until I just mentioned, but we had to relocate.
You heard the birds, and then you didn't.
And then you didn't.
You might have gotten the clue then.
Well, thank you so much for your time and for your commitment to the sport in a unique way. I think it's easy, and we've talked about this before in so many ways. It's easy to just kind of fade out of interest in this sport because it's hard to do this year after year after year and such. And so as we talk, with our audience, part of our goal is to continue to inspire them in their pursuits too. And so thank you for using your experience and your story to help inspire and encourage our audience as well.
Yeah, I would like to say that anyone who's listening who has questions about race walk or is like, this is intriguing to me, or man, I really don't want to try that, but I just have this one question. Like, I would love to talk to you. I've put on a few race walk clinics in the past to kind of teach people how that works. So if you want to try, if you don't want to try, if you're curious about how that works, please reach out to Zach and Andy, reach out to me. I'm sure they'll link all of my information. Yeah.
All of it.
More all than of my information. Yep. My W-2s, wait, no.
So thanks again. And, certainly we'll look forward to continuing to follow the things you've got going on with the track camp and then as well when you're back in competition.
Yeah. Thank you, guys.
So in reflection, if I might circle back to what I think is probably the key insight, the key takeaway from this conversation, when it comes to rebuilding momentum, and Cody sharing from his experiences, he's kind of been through just about anything that any of the rest of us have been through at some point or another to disrupt our momentum or disrupt our training. And so this factor of what it's like when you're trying to come back, when you're in the midst of rebuilding is just one of the most difficult times. It tends to be discouraging. You don't feel quite yourself, if you will, and we talked about that a bit. And I just think it's really important for us to prepare ourselves for that and understand that that's an entirely okay and necessary thing. Like, you have to go through this period where you're just trying to regain the sense of yourself in your training. And you can't rush through that. There's no magic like certain things that are going to just make it all come back. You've got to just put in the time every day or for long enough until it's there.
And running isn't the only thing that moves you forward. And I kind of drew that from this conversation too, because you can do a couple things. One is in momentum, like we mentioned way in the beginning in the intro. There are things you can do even when you are injured, when you can't run, that help generate momentum, even when you don't really see it or feel it. It is helping you move forward and will help you progress and gaining momentum as you're able to run again. The other thing that Monica mentioned is community and the people that you surround yourself with, that energy. You can even feel it in races, and that's why I think a lot of us elevate up during races, is because there's a lot of external momentum to move us forward. So surrounding ourselves with people that help us push, that help us keep going, that help us stay disciplined, and then also just realizing that momentum is not steady. Momentum is an ebb and a flow. And that 4 years that Cody was driving and going and he wasn't getting his PR, there was momentum there that he couldn't see, or he didn't reap the reward of it yet, but he did 4 years later, and that's when he got a lot of those number 1 and number 2 performances for the U.S. So what he was doing in his momentum was he was kind of gathering that energy, so to speak. It's like a dam, and then the dam broke, and there
More
he was
analogies.
with
Why with the
PR.
analogies all over? This is just an analogous topic.
It really is, though. And I think for me, sometimes the expectation can sometimes be, oh, I'm working so hard. Why am I not seeing momentum? Why am I not seeing gains? But really, the truth is there is momentum there. I just haven't arrived yet.
Well, so when you're in that moment, which I know many of you listening are right now or will be soon, where you're trying to rebuild that and it doesn't feel quite like you wish it would feel, and the results aren't there, the times aren't there, the paces aren't there, all of that, just know that you're putting in the work now, because it will be there. And if you feel like you need any kind of help or direction to establish a clear sense of that, feel free to reach out to us. We love to talk through those things, and certainly if we can support you in some kind of way, small or large, we're happy to do it.
And all of this information and the links that we've mentioned will be at AtoZrunning.com/episode 38. And you can follow Cody at Cody, CODEE 0918 on Instagram, and then everywhere else you can follow him at John Cody Risch. So that's pretty simple, but we'll also be linking to that. And of course, he does have that track event that he mentioned, and I'll be linking to that too.
So stay tuned with the A to Z Running podcast, because next on the docket is going to be a series of episodes establishing what we believe to be the 3-part training guide for effective training for anyone. So it's big stuff.
That's a
big
claim.
stuff
Anyway.
coming soon.
Yes, and that will also be full of stories and a lot of fun talk as well. So yeah, stay tuned. Follow us on Instagram at AtoZrunning. Actually, we're everywhere at AtoZrunning. We're even on Pinterest now. So if you want to be able to post some of these blogs, we would love that. That'd be great if you could post those on your Pinterest page, and we're at AtoZrunning_.